welcome to another episode of HashWise Convo. Today joining us is Caezor from RiseChain. I'm really happy to have you here, sir. Thanks for your time. How is it going?
It's going pretty good. Thanks for having me, and look forward to having this little chat.
Yeah, glad to hear that. Maybe we can start if you can maybe introduce yourself a little bit to our audience.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you a little bit quick history of who I am, what I do, and stuff like that, what I've been doing in the space. I found crypto in like the bottom of the COVID crash. So it's quite lucky. I entered at the best time possible, right? Obviously, I didn't like go all in because I was new to it. I was like, what is this Ethereum? What is this Bitcoin thing? So I went in conservatively, but everything just kept going up for the entire bull run, right? So I got really lucky there. And then during that time, I started researching DeFi very heavily. Started a YouTube channel because I like to share. I'm a teacher by training and stuff like that. I'm good at, simplifying things down. So I started a YouTube channel. I didn't really, market it or try to make it like a business or anything like that. I just kind of consider it like a library of DeFi protocols. So I'll do a deep dive on a single protocol in each video where I just explain how does the system work. I don't talk about TA. I don't talk about price. I don't talk about any of this kind of stuff. I just talk about, what does this DeFi protocol do? And that's kind of how I started out and how I kind of got started in crypto and where I've spent the majority of my time. Obviously, I have used a lot of those protocols, but I one of the protocols that I covered once was a protocol called RoboVault. It was pretty cool stuff. They were doing single-sided liquidity provision vaults on 50-50 constant product pools. So they were trying to like solve the impermanent loss issue of those kinds of things by doing lots of stuff. And they ran into some problems because they were, when gas went up, they had to like rebalance, and those gas costs were like very hard to manage. So that's kind of where the founders of RiseChain come from. Now they know me, I know them. We're both like kind of OGs, if you can call, the COVID dump from that time OG status. And they reached out to me and said, "Hey, look, we're building this RiseChain. Would you like to kind of support us and join the team?" Sort of. I'm not really a full-time team member, but I kind of, I am part of what they're doing there. Like, obviously, I'm not coding anything. I'm not building any of it, but just kind of understanding it and sharing it. So that's kind of where I come from and where I am in regards to RiseChain and so forth.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for that. I have two things here. The first one is I really, give kudos to you. I went through a couple of your videos and it's great content. So keep going. I will definitely post a link to your YouTube channel under mine. So kudos to you.
Thanks.
And the second thing is that you are 4 years in crypto and you are on a completely the technology edge of what's possible in crypto, let's say, because the base rollups and the scalability of the base rollups are like completely new primitive. And I guess the RiseChain is on the absolute edge of it. So that's the second kudos. But let's talk about the RiseChain itself. Like, what was the motivation behind building a RiseChain?
Well, no, I don't want to take any credit for any of the innovation or anything kind of going there. I kind of hopped on the train that I saw was pretty cool, right? So the motivation is like, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about having complicated protocols on chains that can't handle them because of traffic, because of high complexity transactions. They kind of saw this issue and then they decided to kind of fix it. And that's why they kind of went with this highly scalable vector, right? Now, the based rollup vector is because they're highly Ethereum aligned. They believe that, leaning on the Ethereum validators with the based rollup system is the right thing to do. And I agree with that. Like that's what makes things like safer. Like all of the L2s right now, they're running on centralized sequencers for the most part. I think almost all of them may. I think Tycho's not the only one, right? So they're all kind of like not leaning on the Ethereum centralization or decentralization. So they can be censored, right? Now, everybody uses them because they're fast, and I don't think they're a net bad for Ethereum, but I do think like it would be ideal if every protocol, every L2 was a based rollup or something, similar to that, in the sense that they decentralized that sequencer and allowed, the Ethereum network, or at least some sort of decentralized network, to sequence their transactions and protect people from MEV and this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, is that possible that the future will be more based than is it today? Because in these days, we see like the siloed L2 ecosystems, like Optimism based stack or Optimism OP stack, the ZK stack from ZK Sync, and etc. and other stacks. Do you think that there is a reason for them to switch to base rollups?
Well, I think it's a market thing. Like I remember the last issue before Eigenlayer and stuff like that was that like Lido was getting too much of the market share of LSTs, right? The liquid staking tokens. So they had a large portion of it. And what the community did was they started speaking out, not saying Lido was bad, but that, we needed alternatives. We needed more LSTs, right? We needed more options so we could decentralize that and stop them from gaining that, like, I think it was 53% or something. I can't remember the exact number, but we wanted to stop them from getting that. So it was the community, the investors, that forced the situation to change. And I think that's the only way that L2s will change. Like if Base starts losing TVL because there are based rollup alternatives, and people start moving there because they feel safer or they feel it's less like exploitative of the users, then Based will do so. I think Based is probably the farthest on the right side of this, because they're run by Coinbase. Coinbase is a publicly traded company. They have to adhere to the stockholders and so forth. So I find Base will probably be one of the last ones to kind of convert this. But on the other hand, Coinbase is very pro crypto. They're doing a lot for the crypto industry. So maybe they might be the first. It's pretty hard to say for certain. But I do see that like it's not a matter of if or when, it's a matter of who forces them to do so. Because like, what's the point? Like, why would they do it if they're getting hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue? Why would they go Based when they can, they feel confident in their ability to run the sequencer and extract, well, I don't want to call it extract, but collect all that revenue. So it's the users that have to force them to do so, like vote with their money, basically. That's the way I look at it. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree here. Basically, but what people think about base rollups in these days is that they are slow because they are dependent on the Ethereum block production, right? But that's not completely true, thanks to pre-confirmations.
Exactly.
But what I found really interesting about Rise Chain is few components there, right? And I would like to talk about them more deeply. The first one is parallel EVM component, because I went through the whole docs of Rise Chain, and there is a statement that the chain would be able to achieve 1,000 transactions per second, which is like unbelievable in these days, in crypto landscape. And parallel EVM is a huge component here that could bring this kind of execution. Like how that thing work in a base rollup, especially?
Yeah. So I'll preface this with, like, again, I'm not a core dev, so I've asked questions, and this is my understanding of how it works. I could be completely wrong, but this is how I understand it, and I think I'm right. So with a parallel execution, There's two aspects here. We'll talk about the continuous pipeline after, but the parallel execution is basically a way to calculate the outcomes of transactions at the same time, and then to compare those calculations to see if there's any dependence. So, for example, if you wanted to, like, say, swap ETH for USDC, and I wanted to swap USDC for ETH, then there is a contradiction. We will have we're both having an effect on the same liquidity pool per se, right? But the parallel execution will be allowed to execute those transactions at the same time, or roughly very close to the same time, and then compare them and make sure what they are writing to the blockchain doesn't break any of that kind of those dependencies between our two transactions. Now, this is basically how I understand it. I tried to make it as simple as possible so that I can, so the viewers and the listeners can kind of understand it. But that's how I understand it. I hope that's kind of, I don't know, do you have anything that you've learned that kind of adds to that or makes it kind of different?
No. I think that's enough. That's pretty fair. Yeah. You touched it a bit already, and that's continuous block pipeline. And that's my second thing that interests me a lot about RiseChain. Could you explain it?
Yeah. So the continuous pipeline is, it took me a little while to dig in there and find out exactly what this thing is, but I can explain it very simply in like one or two sentences. Again, this is how I understand it. If you go to like any of the normal blockchains right now, any of the other L2s or the L1s right now, what they are doing is they have separated the execution layer and the consensus layer. So the consensus layer is basically doing most of the work, like 80% of the time is spent on consensus. And then there's a few other little factors, and a tiny percent of that time is spent on execution. So the consensus layer is basically telling the execution layer, okay, I'm ready again. Start building transactions, start accepting transactions. Now, this isn't like minutes, it's not like the execution layer doesn't have to wait minutes, it's just like 8 seconds, 1 second, 3 seconds, even less, right? For these L2s, 12 seconds for the layer one. So the execution layer has to wait for the consensus layer to tell it, yes, I'm ready. Start send me some transactions to build, some blocks. However, what the continuous pipeline does is it allows the execution layer to not wait for the consensus layer. So it's constantly building blocks or having blocks get ready to send to the consensus layer. And then when the consensus layer says, hey, I'm ready, they can just send it. They don't have to start accepting transactions from users, building the blocks, or organizing and stuff like that, and then sending it forth. So again, this is how I understand the continuous pipeline. I hope this is clear and makes sense.
Yeah, this is very helpful. Thank you. My next question is regarding your stack, because I found something in the docs again, and it's that you are going to basically offer a stack. So it would mean that anyone in the space would be able to build like a similar based rollup as RiseChain and be completely compatible, or
the founders are quite permissionless, open source, ethos aligned. So I haven't heard them actually say to me exactly what you're saying, but I'm not completely surprised that you found this statement, and that they're. I've also heard of some chains that are like in the talks with kind of RiseChain. Of course, everybody wants to see how it performs, see it in production and so forth. But then after that, it's not going to be like siloed, private in a black box. They'll put it out for everyone to share. I don't know specifically. I can't say for certain if there's going to be any kind of licensing or agreements or anything like that. But I'm pretty sure that the founders are pretty open source and pretty sharing. They're working hand in hand with other teams trying to build a better system for everyone. So I wouldn't see them trying to create a difficult situation where other chains cannot adopt the Rice chain stack.
Yeah, that's awesome. We need more teams like this.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the entire space, like Ethereum is very good for that, like as general. And then, you know, you've got these L2s built on top, and they're slowly getting more and more like business orientated, right? Trying to make their dollars protect their IP and stuff like that. And it goes to like all kinds of even on the dApp like level, where you have applications that like, you know, they develop an application and then they throw some coding licenses inside, so some dev licenses and stuff like that. And I've always been a big fan of like open source. You know, that's why we are where we are, in my opinion, is because we kept things open source. We allowed for, you know, rapid innovation, forking, changing. Of course, there are lots of like malicious, lazy forks, but like for every like 10 malicious, lazy forks, there's one super cool idea where they adapt the system and they develop it further and make it more interesting and give us better user experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And from my point of view, the current situation around the whole like rollup centric roadmap or ecosystem is that we are going to see like Mega ETH operate with the centralized sequencer as layer 2 with a really high performance, at least what they claim,
Yeah.
to be, and the Rice chain as base rollup. And what are the advantages of becoming the base rollup? From my point of view, is the absolutely like compatible chain with the mainnet, so you can touch the liquidity there, and every basically DeFi app with its liquidity. So it's really cool, and also the interoperability. So that's two things: composability and interoperability. And I think that these kind of properties cannot be, maintained as centralized layer 2. And I think in the long run, we are going to see the base rollups becoming more and more popular. And I think the Rice chain could be really the base rollup that could start to see the rise of the base rollups. That's from my point of view. What's yours?
Yeah, you're pretty much right on the tail with me. Like I wouldn't spend my time with these guys if I didn't believe in what they're doing. I do believe, like, you know, Mega ETH will be fantastic and it will have excellent user experience. But it goes back to what I said about innovation. Like, if we open source something and allow everybody to kind of plug in, you know, adapt, we get what we have now in the layer 2 ecosystem. We have tons of choices. All of them are slightly a little bit different, with different user experience, different, you know, tech, different security levels, different kind of considerations. And what that does is it allows us to innovate. Like, you don't need to ask permission to spin up an L2. You don't have to call up Vitalik and be, hey, we want an L2. Can we get one, please? You know, you just do it, right? And that's what the space is all about, I think. Now, there is risks to that. You know, there are user risks, especially at, you know, at the dApp layer. You know, people spin up things, they change things they don't understand, and they deploy it, right? And then people get wrecked. So there are these possibilities in the sense of like this kind of the downfalls of it, but the ability for like someone who doesn't have, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, or doesn't want to like go the VC route to pay for some sort of licensing right to use something, then they can use the open source stack, and they can, you know, like, it's like in academia, like a long time ago, if you were good at math or good at stuff, you could join colleges and you could contribute to the knowledge of mankind, right? And then slowly, you know, it became more about like, you have to pay. And then if you don't pay, then you can't, right? And that becomes a problem, I think. I find like what we want as a human race is to allow every single individual, regardless of their financial background or educational level and stuff like that, to be able to contribute in a safe manner, right? So I think the based rollup system is superior in that, like as well as what you mentioned about interoperability and all this kind of stuff. So I like the ethos idea of it, like the why, not so much the how or what can happen. This is kind of what I think about when I'm thinking about why Rice Chain or why based rollups and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In the short time, everything is about trade-offs, but in the long term, everything is about to be connected to the main liquidity hub, which is still the mainnet of Ethereum. And with with Swift and Visa's platform coming into the space via Chainlink, so I think that its role will be much more important in the future. I mean, Ethereum mainnet and the base rollups could be really like the place to go when that happened. Yeah.
And if you think about it, like using like the based rollups, like the Ethereum mainnet, like sequencers, it contributes to the health factor of Ethereum itself, right? Like there are eigenlayer and stuff like this where you can earn extra yield by running a validator and plugging into eigenlayer and stuff like this. But base rollups gives these validators another source of revenue, so it encourages more people to become solo stakers. Now, based rollup has nothing to do with like reducing the requirements of home stakers and stuff like this, or any of this kind of factors. And that's kind of something that's happening in parallel, right? We hear about the ETH core devs trying to reduce this barrier of entry, whether it be financial or technical. And if they can do that as well as based rollups come out, they're not going to come out on the same day probably, but they'll come out, they'll kind of build out in their own branches, but they complement each other quite a bit, right? So we're giving that sequencer revenue to Ethereum validators helps to encourage even more decentralization of the Ethereum network and makes for a better, more healthy ecosystem. So like if you're an ETH maxi and you think based rollups are bad for the system, I would like to understand why. But of course there are technical reasons that I might not be aware of, but in the idealistic ethos version of it, it just makes 100% sense to me.
Absolutely. Now let's discuss a bit what type of specific applications can you foresee or Rice Chain aims to target?
Yeah, so Rice Chain's planning to be like a general use blockchain. So any app can deploy, but I'm a strong believer in like DeFi is the backbone of every chain. If a chain tries to launch and doesn't have DeFi and just uses a specific application, like a gaming network or NFT marketplaces and stuff like that, I find it lacks quite a bit of ability to seed or to get growth and to get actual users, because everybody cares about money and DeFi is where you make money, right? So once you settle in those backbones, those guardrails, like you can't do meme coins without dexes, right? I guess you can kind of with the bonding curves, right? But you can't do meme coins without somewhere to swap them. So like of course I believe that of course we will start with like DeFi applications, but there are other ideas on the table too, like AI agents and gamify stuff. Like it's an open source general use platform, and the fact that it has like such high throughput, we don't need to worry so much about like spam and different kinds of applications taking up block space, so to speak, as much. Of course it's not infinite, but gigagas is pretty good considering what we have right now.
Yeah, can you maybe a pitch to us some projects that are already building on Rice Chain?
Yeah, so of course we're digging around with different teams trying to get native applications. So applications that are theme aligned with Rise chain. So the first one that is pretty set in bones will be like Rice Swap, RICE. Now, because Rice chain has this like Rice theme meme connection, so they're going to call it Rice Swap. So they're building this out right now, and it's going to be like VE33 DEX. There are lots of like protocols that are coming, like with TVL and kind of expanding their own protocol footprint into Rice chain, like for example, EtherFi and so forth. There are some other ones too, but they're not like 100% kind of locked in, so I can't really say in public what they might be and so forth. But those are some examples of like the two routes that we're welcoming into Rise chain, and that is, people who want to build something, whether it be just like forking code that's out in the space already, or building something new and innovative, as well as welcoming established protocols that are already on other chains to increase their footprint.
Yeah, thanks. We appreciate the alpha.
Yeah, no worries.
What's your thought process about like the quote that layer 2s are parasitic to Ethereum?
Yeah, I like. I don't want to take credit for this. The one that sits most well with me is Anthony Sassel's take on it, which is it's kind of crazy. Like, of course the TVL is leaving Ethereum and going to Base. That's unquestionable, right? It has happened, and people say that this is parasitic. However, that TVL would also probably leave and go to an alternative L1. So like if Coinbase launched an L1 called Base, the TVL would go there, and they wouldn't be using ETH as gas. They wouldn't be using ETH in liquidity pools. It would just be like, it would be a vampire attack, right? Whereas the way that they're going now is like, the only reason why people can say it's parasitic is because of the centralized sequencers. But if they become based, then it plugs right back in and becomes completely uncentralized. Now and if we look at the blob market now, it's saturated, right? They are talking about raising the blob market to encourage growth, right? But right now there's quite a bit of ETH being burned as a result of L2s at the current time, because the blob market is saturated. I can't remember the numbers. I'd have to dig through the tweets, but it was significant. I saw in one day something like 8 million or something like this. I don't quote me on that. I'd have to double check through the tweets and kind of do that. But a significant amount of number of TVL has been burned because of the Rollups roadmap. So I find it to be kind of silly to say that they're parasitic, like that they are, sucking on, like a parasite to Ethereum, just, taking Ethereum's popularity, because they give so much back in other ways. They might not be giving back monetarily, but they are giving back as an ecosystem and expanding the Ethereum ecosystem. So I don't think so. Of course, that we can improve the situation in different ways, but it's definitely not the same as TVL going to other alternative L1s.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Plus, Ethereum functions as a monetary premium across all these layer 2 networks, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I
check
have
all the DeFi.
collateralized ETH on Mantle, for example, and Mantle doesn't even use ETH as gas, right?
Yeah.
So like it's still, you can collateralize your Ethereum healthily on all of these L2s. So it's not saying to ETH, oh, you're worthless, come and bring your TVL over here. I believe it's very symbiotic.
Yeah, totally. The ticker is ETH.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, very much. I have a last question for you.
Sure.
It is, what can we expect from Rise Chain in the coming weeks or maybe months?
Yeah, sure. Right now, there's a closed test net. So if there are any protocols that wish to kind of give it a try, then they can reach out to the Rise team through the Discord or what have you. Probably the Discord's the easiest place. So they join the Discord, reach out to the team, and they can deploy to the private testnet if they want to do so. In the near future, there will be a public testnet. So all of the community, all of the users can kind of come and use it. It will be an incentivized public testnet. So it's a way to kind of, I can't say for certain how, because like these plans are not set in stone, they're not written down, but you can probably consider it something along the lines of, send some transactions and, look to the future in points, right? So, I'm not exactly sure if it'll be users or protocols who collect points, so to speak, right? But, there is going to be a public incentivized testnet, and then mainnet, hopefully soon thereafter. The goal is, Q1 to go for mainnet. But things always change. You gotta adapt. You gotta play with the hand that's dealt to you as it's dealt to you, right? So I don't quote me on next Q1, but I that's the hope, that's the dream, and so forth. That's
well said. It's been a pleasure to having you on the show, sir. Thank you very much for your time, and would like to see you next time, maybe on the show again.
Yeah, sure. Of course. It was a pleasure. Nice talking to you, Homer. And I'm a big fan of Simpsons too, by the way.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Have a good time.
Okay. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.